Welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today, let's talk about incentives. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. I am Kale Houser. Thank you for joining me today, tonight, this morning, this afternoon, whatever it is for you. Hey, I wanted to talk a little bit about incentives, and I know it's an interesting concept in the form of there's no one right approach to this. You know, some people will say, "I'll just pay them more money," and that absolutely, certainly can and may work for a time, but there is a level that people like money doesn't matter anymore, right? It'll fix their problem short term, but not necessarily long term, or it motivates them short term, but not necessarily to keep showing up and keep doing and improving. But I want to talk a little bit of this example. So I enlisted in the Air Force. Mainly, I'll be honest, I was the one that I knew I wanted to be an officer, but I also knew that I couldn't afford, or nor did I want to pay for my bachelor's degree. So I go, oh, well, I can enlist and either go to school while in service or get out and use my GI Bill, get my degree, and then commission after that. So I enlisted as a form of getting my education paid for, but ultimately, too, because I knew I wanted to be an officer in the Air Force. Well, long story short, I ended up getting my degree because I got an Air Force scholarship and did that for a couple of years. And as part of that, in order to get my commission, I went to what's called OTS for the Air Force. That's Officer Training School. Now, the different services had different names for it. I think OCS, Officer Candidate School, is one of the main ones for the Navy and Marine Corps, I believe. And I think even maybe the Army. So maybe it is just the Air Force that calls it something different. But it's one of the three commissioning sources, right, for the military. One of them being the academies, so the Air Force Academy, the West Point, and then Annapolis for the Navy are the three service academies where you can go through as your 4-year degree, and then get commissioned at the end of it. And then there's ROTC, which is Reserve Officer Training Cadet Corps. I don't even know what the C is. It doesn't really matter. But that's where you take like extra classes while you're in whatever school that you're at, whether it be University of Michigan or local community college. They have ROTC detachments set up that are specifically set up for that. And when you graduate your college, you just commission straight into your service. But I went the other route where, at the time, I think it's shortened now. It was 3 months of just going to officer training school, 100%. It's just like, well, not just like, but it's similar in nature to basic military training, is that it's total immersion. And that's what you do for 3 months. And at the end of it, you graduate with your lieutenant's bars. So this is relevant to my story here that I'm about to impart, and keeping in mind that I went through basic training. I went through tech school when I came out of basic training, and each of those programs had a honors graduate program or an honors graduate incentive. When I got to OTS, Officer Training School, which is in Alabama, my only goal was to commission. My only goal was to graduate, to pass all my exams and walk that line, get that salute and commission, and then go about my business in the Air Force of whatever that job was going to be at the time, which was an engineer at the time. And I remember this so specifically because it was so interesting. So as part of OTS, we have a flight commander, and that's a captain, right? Somebody that is their job in the Air Force to train future, officers, just like drill instructors, except they're specific to OTS. And he's like our class leader. He's our teacher. He's our instructor. He, in our case, it was a man. There are certainly women that do it as well. But I'll never forget, at one point, we're in our classroom, and my flight had, I want to say like 13 of us. I don't even remember anymore. It's been quite a few years. And we're just kind of talking back and forth in one of the rare moments. Because, of course, at the beginning, it's like ultra rigid and all this stuff. And then steadily they kind of become more human and interact with you on a more human level versus the captain to trainee type of interactions. And one of those was, he's like, oh, as we're asking him questions about his life and his career, and like, oh, he was former enlisted, and he got his commission and as a communications officer, because I think that's what he did as enlisted. But then he kind of, and I don't know if he did this purposely or he just didn't care because he was coming towards the end of his career. I think he was already at like 16 years by this point as a captain. So he was coming pretty close, maybe one more assignment after this. So he didn't care too much about promotions or anything of that nature. And he told us like, yeah, he was essentially volunteered to do this job, to be an OTS instructor, which means the Air Force recognized this need because they have to have instructors to teach the next generations, the next classes, the next trainees, for future, all that manning. So when they don't get volunteers, and honestly, it wasn't a very prestigious job because there isn't a lot of progression in it. Like it doesn't set you up for like, oh, wow, you were an OTS instructor. That's awesome. We're going to give you a bump up versus other people. And it takes you out of your career field, whatever that may be, in his case, communications. So you don't advance as much or learn as much in your career in that specific specialty that you have. So he kind of made it known, not overtly, but fairly obviously, that he kind of didn't want to be there. And he was only there because he had to be. He was ordered to be there. So that kind of just sets the tone for the type of interaction. He wasn't super gung-ho. He was a good instructor. He gave appropriate feedback and helped and things of that nature, but he definitely wasn't like, Air Force blue and blue, you guys are going to be amazing officers and it's your responsibility to take care of your enlisted and your younger junior officers and all this stuff. He wasn't that at all. And I remember this was a couple weeks into it, and we were having our individual feedback sessions with our flight commander and this captain in this case. And I'm waiting outside his cubicle because, of course, it's all, you got to go through these formal things and wait and all this kind of stupid stuff, just classic military jargon and things. And I remember going into his office and, he's like reviewing my grades and my performance and all these different things. And he goes, hey, I noticed that it appears that you're not giving your absolute best, and studying as much as you could be to like really go after honor graduate, because there was an honor graduate program for OTS. And I told him, you're right, sir. And I think most people would be like, oh yeah, I'll do better and, like make up excuses. But I was doing it really kind of purposely, of not that I was meeting bare minimums, but I wasn't killing myself to be so competitive of being the number one graduate of my entire like 90-person class. Because there were some legitimately like smart people in my class. Not that the tests were anything extreme, there were multiple choice leadership type, tests, like nothing crazy. But I remember specifically, and I can still see the look on his face, I said, you're right, sir. I says, it really comes down to a matter of effort. Says, I can absolutely bust my tail. I can stay up until 3 a.m, even though we get up at 4:30 in the morning to do PT and all this stuff and study this exam and do my absolute darnest to get 100% on these couple of, these graded exams that we have throughout the rest of the course. And then, try to impress as we get our leadership evaluations, which are just 100% subjective based on whoever's evaluating you at the time, of if they like the way you do things or not. Like there's no necessarily right or wrong. I mean, there's obviously wrong, but it's extremely subjective. And I can bust my tail to, try to please whoever's instructing me to show my leadership qualities in these completely made up arbitrary scenarios. And I could get top grad. And I said, but like, what does it get me? Like, why? It says, it gets me like my name on a little trophy that stays at OTS. So once I leave in, another month and a half or 2 months, like I'm never going to see that trophy again. So, okay, I get a little certificate, OTS honor graduate or top graduate. I said, and then it gets me, if I wanted to apply towards the Air Force master's program, which is called Air Force Institute of Technology, the AFIT. It's where officers can go to get it's like the Air Force's own school to get your master's degree or even your PhD and beyond. It gives you like that little, just extra little bump to, as you apply to get accepted into this program. And I'm like, and I have no desire to go to AFIT because it's like legitimately a hard school and that's not what I want my career to look like. So it really came down to incentive. There's no reason for me to do it. I said, outside of that, like it literally gets me nothing other than less sleep. And then just no matter how much effort I put into it, it's still subjective to whoever's grading me at the end with these leadership exercises, which paid a large part of it. And he looked at me because he's kind of sitting back. I think he even had his arms folded a little bit at the time. And he goes, okay. Because I told him, I said, I was honor graduate out of basic training, which means I was one of the top three, I think, right? I think they chose 3 honor graduates out of each squadron. So that was one of the top 3 in my squadron out of basic training, which means I did bust my butt. I did do all the things I needed to do to ensure that. But you know why I did that? Because you got a 3-day pass at the end of basic training to go hang out in San Antonio and do your own thing, as well as, you got your little ribbon and, the recognition and stuff like that. But it was really about the 3-day pass of, I want to get out of here for 3 days and not just hang around doing extra duty and stuff. Like, there was a legit incentive for it. And I said, and when I went to my tech school, I got distinguished grad out of that, which means, man, at tech school, because tech school is largely academics. I said, I got distinguished grad out of that, which means I was the top graduate of my class. Because in getting that, again, you get your little certificate and things like that. In getting that, I got guaranteed one of my top 3 choices of bases to get assigned to, which turned out to be an absolute blessing because they were trying to send me to Omaha, and I didn't want to go to Omaha, and I ended up getting Florida at the time coming out of tech school. I said there was a reason to do it. There was an incentive to do it. But here, relating it back to him, and as I'm talking to this captain, I said, there's really no reason for me to do it. Like, there's no reason to succeed at OTS other than to not fail, right? It's kind of the age-old adage of, what do you call a medical student who graduates with a D+ average? You call them doctor, right? They're still a doctor. Yeah, they're not going to be, probably name some prestigious hospital or a brain surgeon or anything of that nature, but they're still a doctor. And it's the same thing with OTS, except he was even less of that, because you're still going to go into your job no matter how much you sucked or excelled at OTS. You're still going to go be a pilot. You're still going to go be an engineer. You're still going to go be a finance officer. Like, it doesn't matter. It makes no impact. And I'm telling you this story because for 2 parts. One is, as you look at yourself, what incentivizes you for high performance when it's warranted? And then 2, and more importantly, what incentivizes your people? What incentivizes your staff, your sales team, your service reps, your warehouse logistics people, your office admins, whatever your work environment looks like? What gets them to perform at a manner that is commensurate with the compensation or incentives that are being offered for them? Now, certainly in a sales type scenario where it's commission based, they perform, they earn money. That's how it works. And the better and more efficient and greater they perform, the more money they earn. But when you start dealing with, whether it be hourly or salary type employees, sorry for my stumble there, you really need to look at how you incentivize them. And maybe it is in the form of financial bonuses for meeting targets and goals and revenue milestones or project milestones, delivery milestones, whatever that is. But it could be something else entirely that is unique to your business. It could be training. It could be conferences that you send them to that will further expand their capabilities and expertise. It could be obviously time off or parking spaces. Like, there's literally an endless list of ways that you can incentivize people that aren't solely based around finances. And I would caution you that anyone that tells you like, oh, just pay me more, they are not, how do I put this delicately and appropriately? That person that is solely based on money or incentivized by money will never be satisfied, right? You understand this? It doesn't matter how much you pay them. They will never be satisfied with that. You need to find something else, and maybe even someone else that is incentivized and motivated and inspired by other things, right? Whether it be belonging to a community or whatever your service industry is associated with. So I would highly encourage you to kind of look at that and reflect on what that looks. And compensation, absolutely, you can't ignore it, right? It's why you live in a capitalistic society. It's what makes our world go round as far as the exchange of money and services and products. But it's not the end-all be-all. And that's really what I wanted to talk to you about, is there are other things that are intrinsic in nature that will help incentivize your people to be better, to do better, more efficient, and all those types of things, as you can see. So that's my 2 cents on that. Would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know. Have a fantastic afternoon, no matter where you're at in the world. Bye.